Hi, folks. Time to say goodbye. After a long weekend, I have to return the G9 Performance back to Mach Motors. Shout out to Mach Motors. Thanks so much for supporting me in providing the car for such a long weekend. That was very, very nice of you. Thanks very much. But first things first, please subscribe to my channel. That would be super nice. Thanks so much. Today is about two things. On the one hand, I want to give you some results of city drive tests that I did, and then at the end, draw some conclusions regarding the G9 overall after these couple of days of testing it. So let's start with the city drive. I did a test for myself last weekend when I was traveling with my daughter and my wife throughout the city. And I wanted to check how thirsty is such a huge car when you do what 99% of the people do, let's say 95% of the time, which is driving in city, maybe rural conditions for half an hour or so for shopping, for just going out for dinner or something like that. So I chose a trip where we were traveling on the one way 27 kilometers. It took 30 minutes. So we had an average of 54 kilometers per hour, which is very, very close to the WLTP. And the car consumed 14.5 kilowatts per hour. We drove the same way, more or less, back. It was a little bit shorter, but it's the same kind of elevation difference from home to the target place and then from the target place home. And there it was 24.5 kilometers. It took 26 minutes. Average was 56 kilometers per hour. And since it went a little bit uphill, the consumption was higher as expected at 19.4 kilowatt hours on 100. And then one can now calculate the average across the entire trip. And so we had 51.5 kilometers, basically in a sort of round trip, leveling out the elevation differences. The average speed was 55 kilometers per hour, and the average consumption, considering the small difference in distance between the first and the second trip, was 16.8 kilowatts. So that's not super low, obviously. But on the other hand, I think the important thing is if we compare this now to the official data regarding the WLTP cycle. I show you here the values for all three versions, but the relevant one is the all-wheel drive performance on the right side. And there we see, first of all, that it has 20.1 kilowatt hours on 100 kilometers WLTP consumption. One has to consider that that always includes charging losses. That's why you cannot take the net capacity of a battery, in this case 92.2 kilowatt hours, and divide it by the WLTP consumption in order to calculate the WLTP range. You will always end up with a shorter range than the shown range, and that is because correctly, WLTP differentiates between how far the car can go on a charge and how much kilowatt hours it consumes when you have to pay for it. So the 20.1 kilowatt hours is what you in the end consume paying for it at a charging station. There are the charging losses which are included. Usually you can calculate something like 10% or so is a realistic one. And the other one is the range that you can achieve with the average consumption. Sadly, they don't show that value usually, so you have to guess that. But in our case, we don't because we have it. We know it's 16.8. And if we divide 92.2 kilowatt hours net capacity of the battery by the 16.8 kilowatt hours consumption that we had, leveling out the elevation differences. So it's, I think, a fair value. We end up with 548 kilometers of real range, if I did not make any calculation mistake. And that is extremely close to the official 540. Interestingly, with a G6, I constantly achieve 550 kilometers and it's rated for only 510. So the G9 consumes also relatively more in the city than I would have expected. So the weight here plays a role. One has to take that into consideration. So overall, I think the result is fair, not absolutely amazing. And one can say that you can calculate for the city consumption that the WLTP values hold. Of course, as we've seen in the video on the highway, that's an entirely different story then. Another thing maybe about the car that I noted is that, of course, the air suspension is sort of really cool. And although it does not make such a huge difference to my car, especially if you put it on comfort, it's comparable. Comfort Plus is maybe a little bit better. And Sport is definitely a lot harder, but it is a cool thing. And I would like to show you something that just visualizes how much of a difference you can create by choosing the different levels of suspension. Have a look here. So here you see the difference in the air suspension on the highest trim and the lowest trim here at with the Black Edition. That's quite a difference. What is my conclusion regarding the car now after a couple of days of driving? You've seen probably the other videos on the range on the highway and city driving and first impressions and so on. For me, there are very few minuses, and I can point out some pluses, but there are actually more pluses than I could point out, I would say. Let's start with the minuses. I find it a bit sad that the car does not have this virtual mirror, because that is something that I would like to see. I'm used to it now from the G6, and I find it really helpful. This one has a bigger window in the back, so it is not really needed, but it's nice to have. The second, and the thing that I really don't understand at all, is with the last update, 5958906, if I'm right, they introduced the one pedal drive to the P7, to the G6, but not the G9. Come on, folks, you can do better than that. That's a real pity, I would say. And the other thing is then when it comes to space on the rear seats, behind the driver, when you are such a tall guy as I am, 1.92 meters, then it becomes a little bit tight on the back seat. So you can just sit there. That could be a little bit more, I thought. But then again, complaining on a very high level, considering how big I am. That's basically all that I could complain of. But when it comes to the pluses, there's a wide range of that. I mean, it starts with storage space and the frunk. That's, of course, a huge thing. I like that very much. I wish I would have a frunk in my G6. I still don't understand why they don't do it. But storage is plentiful. And there is absolutely nothing that I would miss in that regard. And probably the biggest selling point here is the interior quality. I already think that the G6 is on a luxurious level with the quality, but this here is again another level. It has even nicer materials in certain parts. It has this super cool sound system where the speakers just elevate when you drive and go down again when you stop. It has this marvelous double screen, and my wife and daughter absolutely loved the second screen for the passenger because they could watch music videos and stuff. And I'm not distracted because it is black to me here. I cannot see anything on it. So they are really amazing. I also even thought that the big screen for the driver would be smaller than in my car. And I think it is, but marginally, if at all, really not much. It just appears smaller because it is more stretched due to the second screen. So that is super luxurious. It's one of the things that I like most in terms of things that my car doesn't have and this one does is the leg rest. The way it works, that it rolls up from the bottom and it goes really far and it's very smoothly integrated. There's no gap between the seat and the leg rest when it extends, other than it was in my Mercedes before, which was an older Mercedes, granted. That is just excellent and really good for driving. I have it now all the time, and I will most likely miss that quite a bit. Air suspension, when we talk about kind of comfort ride, the car has a lot in that direction. It definitely has a really nice air suspension, and I'm constantly driving it on Comfort Plus because then it basically ignores all kinds of bumps. So super nice. One small thing that could be better, by the way, so I add that back to the list of improvements. For me, the steering is slightly less direct. In the most direct setting, it's still less direct than in the G6, and I like that, so that could be better. But it's not a deal breaker at all, and it's also a question of taste. Some people like that. So back to the positives. Finally, apart from the interior quality, which is really nice, I think one has to mention the power. And of course, this is the performance, so it has 423 kilowatt. That's a lot, and you can feel it. When you go on country roads, it just pushes like crazy. It accelerates from zero, especially if you kick down like nothing. So you have always plenty of power, far more than you would need. I assume in the long range it will be considerably less because it's one engine less and it's not all-wheel drive. So that will make a difference. But overall, fantastic. Charging speed, something that I don't test because we have plenty of that out there. And for me, the gold standard in this is anyway Nyland, and he already did it. And he showed how incredibly fast this car can charge. That's anyway pretty much unbeatable, especially for such a big car. You have 12 minutes and you're back at 80% on a 92 kilowatt battery. Overall, I've shown that if you go on the highway at 120, you have a reasonable range under not easy conditions because I did it with quite a lot of elevation of 400 kilometers. And considering the high speed of this car, that's plenty. So all these things, marvelous. Then we come to the pricing. And here, the Czech Republic is slightly different. In Germany and in other countries, you always have different settings on how pricing is made. And sadly, here we do not have that many discounts as we see in other countries. So I just go with a list price. And it's slightly different from the G6. Here, it's that all three, the standard, the long range, and the performance, all come in two options. You can do it non-premium. That means then you have artificial leather seats and you have no massage. Or you pay for the premium package, which is roughly 100. And then you get exactly these extras. I would always go for the premium, especially because the massage seats are just something that one wants to have. And also I find the smell of leather just so much better than artificial leather. So if one does that, you start off with the standard range and at roughly 1.5, and you end up at roughly 2 million, depending on what you configure in terms of tow hook and colors. That's pretty much all you can add. So you can say the range is between 1.5 and 2, and it's more or less in 250 steps. So here, I would say if one is really keen on a lot of performance and stuff, well, you have to go for the performance model, clearly. If you are somebody who wants to have the space and you're not going super long distances all the time, standard range is actually fine. It does its job very well. It has enough power. It still has very high charging speed. It has a smaller battery and substantially smaller. It's even minimally smaller than in the G6. So you can expect a realistic range on the highway of 360 kilometers, and that might not be enough for many people because that is 100 to 0%. So my opinion is for most people here, probably the long range is the cleverest solution. You have more power, you have the top charging speed, same as with the performance. You have everything basically the same as in the performance, except for the power. That's the only difference. Everything else is the same. And therefore, you have even more range, like 580 roughly, and you save quite a lot of money. So if it were me, that would be the car to go to. In general, I think the G9 here, if I consider now the Czech situation, is optimal for, sorry. So in general, I think that the G9 is kind of the perfect car for especially families, especially when you have your own house. It's not that you really need it, because with this huge battery in the city, you have easily a range of 600, 650 kilometers, which means if you drive just during the day, you easily do it. If you don't commute, if you just do now and then some shopping and this and that, you can probably go 2-3 weeks without charging. And you can anyway here charge in every shopping mall. But of course, it's particularly nice if you're commuting from the outskirts, if you come from Průhonice or Benešov or Říčany or so and have to go to the city every day. That's then where electric cars in general shine. And then you have the advantage here. This is the one car that you need as a family, because this is plentiful for 4 people plus luggage. 5 is a bit of a stretch because the center seat is not that comfortable. But 4 people, so 2 adults, 2 kids, super. You can put a dog in the trunk, no problem whatsoever. And then, of course, you have the huge advantage that you practically never have to go charging because you charge at home, either just on a normal plug, that also works, or you have a wall box. And then if you consider that such a car here, for example, I showed that in the city driving, you have 17 kilowatts roughly consumption. And that means that is the equivalent of 1.7 liters. That is when exactly all the other SUVs, like an X5, X6, GLE, and so forth, that's when they consume crazy amounts of diesel or benzene even worse. Not talking about pollution, that's the one thing, but think about the consumption. This is the equivalent of 1.7 liters. I would consider that the perfect family car for the city here in Prague, Brno, wherever you are, especially when you have a house. Yeah, so that's it. A shout out goes to Mach Motors in Motol and Milan, who is my contact there. They are so nice, and they were so friendly to give me this car for the long weekend for a test. And you can also go there and ask. They happily give you cars for some time to test out, and you probably will also get some good deal there. In any case, thanks so much for helping me with this video. Really useful. Take care, folks. And let me know whether you are already electric here in the Czech Republic and what you drive, because of course there are also many other nice cars out there which are better than burning fuel. Take care. Ciao, ciao.